Good evening, folks. I'm John Canter. I'm the Double Broker Bounty Hunter, and thank you so much for joining us on Stop the Scam. This is a weekly show that we're going to be doing, talking about different scams in the transportation industry. And today we're going to be putting a lot of attention into I know it, everyone's going to sit there and boo me on this. We're going to be talking about dispatchers. So with me today, I've got the queen of dispatchers, Kate from Rock Dove Freight Solutions. She will actually be co-hosting the show with me moving forward. And a special guest, Shane Mick with Freight Medic Logistics, who's also here. And between the three of us, I think we're looking at somewhere around 50, 60 years of dispatching experience. And we've been around the block helping different carriers try to navigate the world of freight, which when you rely on the spot market more than half of your life, then it can be a graying experience. So the show, and one of the things that I really wanted to get into was what makes a dispatcher. What is special about them? Why are they not brokers? What's the distinction? We know FMCSA put out rules back in the fall identifying the difference between a dispatcher and a broker. So Shane, I know you were talking extensively with FMCSA during that process. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, to start, those aren't new rules. Those rules have been out since 1980 when they did the whole the deregulating. So they basically just kind of manipulated them a little bit to make people think that they changed them. In those rules, it states that mentions a bona fide agent of the carrier. Now, you got a lot of mixed misconception of this rule. I've called. I've run my dispatching company for over 5 years. We're well established. I call periodically to the FMCSA just to ensure that we're doing everything the right way. And basically, if you're an independent dispatcher and you have multiple trucks that you're dispatching, it's impossible for you to be a bona fide agent of one company. The only option that you would have is to be a bona fide agent for one of your carriers and dispatch off of the spot market for the rest of them. So, mainly that's the difference between a broker and a dispatcher is a broker is allowed to solicit the freight from the shippers, and a dispatcher, he's not able to. You get so many of these dispatchers, especially the overseas dispatchers. Oh, we have loads. They don't have nothing. Either it's one of two things. They're either looking off the load board at available loads that they're going to try and double broker and poach from another broker, or they're double brokering in the sense that they're they're acquiring the loads one way or another illegally or outside of the regulations. For them to do it the proper way, it's just like I was just asking you about the box trucks. It's, you don't go contracts. Dispatchers, we're spot market. If you would have asked me 3 years ago about what's the benefits of a dispatcher, I would have said the matter of relationships with the brokers, the amount of freight volume that we can pull, we have a better relationship and we can leverage that to negotiate better rates. Since this time last year, that's out the window. The negotiations out. There is no loyalty from any brokers, hardly at all. I think I've got one broker in the 5 years. I mean, this guy's on our Christmas list, and he's only able to do certain things. I mean, it's the brokerages are they're out to make their money. I mean, you look at Coyote, you look at TQL, they're laying people off left and right, and they're leaving these agents with no choice but to do what they're being instructed to do. So, right now, the only benefit to that can be stated as a dispatcher is you are handling all of the stuff that a truck doesn't have time to handle while he's driving. You're able to keep that truck moving. You're able to keep them wheels turning and that revenue generating. He doesn't have to pull over. He doesn't have to call the brokers. He doesn't have to do 15 million phone calls trying to negotiate a load because he's got you to do that, But I mean, everybody says, oh, dispatching's illegal. This new change. No, they need to really pay attention and get on the phone. Don't argue with me on social media. Don't, get on the phone, call FMCSA and ask them, but make sure you're asking them the right questions. Don't ask them if dispatching's illegal. Because
I've seen in my group, there's been a gentleman who's been going on about dispatching for multiple carriers is illegal.
No,
and that's not the way I interpret it either. Well, what's your interpretation on that?
Well, I mean, listen, again, dispatching, there is no regulation against dispatching. Nowhere in the regulations is dispatching mentioned. Brokering is mentioned. Bona fide agent is mentioned. Now, again, bona fide agent means that you are a sales agent for the carrier. You're not a dispatcher. You're not a broker. You are a sales agent. You are out soliciting the contract of the shipper for that particular carrier. And a lot of people are using, oh, you got to be a bona fide. You can only dispatch for one carrier. That's not true. They're like many, their misconception, and they refuse to go into it deeper to find out the truth. One person could dispatch for as many trucks as they can handle. I mean, there is no regulation on it. The regulations are written so vaguely and so confusing that, your average individual who doesn't look into it isn't going to understand them.
Yeah. Kate, what do you think on this? You've been dealing with dispatchers and on a large scale. What's your take?
I agree with Shane. I mean, Shane is like the FMCSA's BFF at this point. So
oh no,
he is a lot more well-versed. That's why I wanted him to be here. He's a lot more well-versed in the legality and hearing it firsthand from the FMCSA. So the way that he explained it is the way that I've always interpreted it. And I also want to point out that in that same document, it states just because one of these criteria is being met does not mean that you meet the criteria for needing to have a broker license or something. It's a case-by-case basis. So just because you do one of the 9 things that are on there, I believe there's 9 or something like that, does not mean that you are in violation of any kind of regulation. Everything is done on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, one of the other things I think is important to note in that same document that was released last year was that they were very clear in stating that these rules are not enforceable by law. There is no law that does any kind of restriction to this. The closest thing to it would be the regulation in MAP 21 that offers the fine for illegal brokerage. But that, first off, you have to be caught doing that.
Second off, you got to have somebody that's going to enforce it.
That's the other part of that. FMCSA, I think in 2022, I read a statistic where they only actually investigated, I think, they prosecuted 22 cases of double brokering in 2022, and 5 saw jail time. The rest of them saw fines.
I'd like to see who those were. See if any of them were the ones I turned in.
I know I turned in a bunch. Again, back to MAP 21. MAP 21 requires brokers to report double broker activity directly to the Office of the Inspector General at DOT. So anytime that our program catches a double broker, that's what we do. How many of those actually get investigated? Who knows? I know I've reported the same brokerage 7 times in 5 weeks at one point last year. It was.
Now, one thing I do want to mention, you were talking about there is no law against the, that you're breaking if you're acting as against the bona fide agent and the new ruling out there. Now, the one thing that, from a dispatcher's aspect, if you're creating contracts with shippers for your carriers, you better darn well know the legalities that you're getting involved in, and you better understand what needs to be written in those contracts, and you better understand that now, being a dispatcher, there's so many different legal standpoints of things that you do that will open you up for liability responsibilities to the carriers. I seen somebody offering, how did they word it? Basically, they map the routes for the carrier. Well, if that carrier were ever to have a problem on one of the routes that they mapped and have a serious accident, that dispatcher is fully liable. These brokers that want to do these check calls and stuff, and a dispatcher that does it. I mean, if you don't do it the right way, that opens you up for accepting responsibility as an operations division of the carrier.
I think there are a lot of unwritten rules that govern dispatchers as we know them today. And I don't think anyone, certainly not in 1980 when the laws were first written, no one ever really anticipated a dispatcher developing. It was a need in the industry that came about only in the last 10 years. But it's such a strong need, particularly for your 1 and 2 truck fleets. That's where it becomes a big issue and a liability. But they also mitigate significant liabilities when it comes to dealing with fraud in the industry. Like, I don't know of a single dispatcher who's reputable that can't spot a double broker a mile away. They can help navigate around the scams when they do come up. And boy, they come up often.
Well, not only that, but listen, I've got a lot of experience, and I'll be the first to tell you, listen, we've put guys on double brokered loads, and a lot of times we put them on there knowing that they're double brokered. It's because once it's on that truck, now I can fight and I can get the other broker to pay for the load. It's not until it starts getting loaded sometimes that you realize that it's double brokered. The key is having the experience and the knowledge to know how to recover that load. By recovering that load, you're eliminating the possibility of the carrier not getting paid at all, and 9 times out of 10, you're increasing the revenue that's on the load. So, I
don't think it's quite that 9 times out of 10, at least not anymore. Certainly, this time last year it was. I've always classified double brokering in 2 different forms. You have the skim off the top form, which is what most of us are used to. But over the course of the last year, with rates being so low, we haven't quite seen that. What we've been seeing is the opposite of it, which I call the too good to be true. So when you are and talking about booking loads intentionally that are double brokered, if you are actually kind of fishing for these scammers in an attempt to stop them and to get better revenue off the load, you need to make damn sure that it is off the top. So there are certain ways that you can look for that. What rate are they posting? How is that relative to the market rate for the area? There are clues out there to that, but you got to be careful if you're going to try to play that kind of a game against a scammer.
Let me be clear: I don't go out hunting for them. But if one of my dispatchers has spent a couple hours looking for a load, and he books a load, driver's at the location and picking it up, and he calls me and says, "Hey, there's an issue with this BOL. All right, send me the BOL. Let me take a look at it. Before I tell him to unload it, I'm going to see if I can't get it recovered." And it depends on who's running it. Me and Kate were just having this discussion the other day. BASF, they get their loads double brokered all the time. And it's because it's so difficult to get in touch with their shipping departments. So a company like that, if I see that, nope, go ahead and tell them to unload it. We'll take a loss on this one, and I'll leave the stuff sit on the dock. But others, we had one last spring. It was a nursery, like a florist nursery. They were in in the tri-state area of New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And I got the
What,
paper.
you gonna skip Delaware in that tri-state area? Come on.
Well, Delaware, yeah, Delaware. But
Sorry,
and
I'm from Delaware.
It was a round trip load. You know, the guy he would take it up to, I believe it was Massachusetts. He would unload there, put the empty carts back on, and bring them back. I got to looking at it, and it just looked fishy. Ended up, it was a broker out of Canada. So I got a hold of the shipper. He gave me the information for the broker. I got in touch with the broker, and she honestly, I mean, unless she fed me a line, she had no idea about double brokering in the States. She said she don't experience it a whole lot up there. This was her only account in the States. And she, you know, basically we talked for a couple of weeks, you know, me explaining to her what to look for, explaining how we were going to fix it. And that was one where the broker had actually priced it higher than what she was getting paid for the load. And because of the way we helped her out and everything, she still paid us what we were agreed to pay, you know, be paid on the load. She took a hit on that one. But, you know, I mean, I put her in touch with Carrier OK so she could start vetting things a little better. And, you know, she gave us a heck of a write-up on our reviews. I mean, she was very thankful for being able to, you know, to catch that and notify her of it. So, but then you have other companies like,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Shane. Finish up. Finish your call.
You have other companies like, I want to say it was Roadway that we called a double broker for them. And when I called him, the guy was like, I mean, he was accusing me of lying. And I'm like, listen, I got your freight on a truck. You know, you can tell me I'm lying all you want, but I got the BOL, I got the freight on the truck. And so he agreed to pay us, you know, because I'll never tell them straight up front. You know, if they ask me, well, what'd you book the load for? No, what'd you book the load for? You know, I'm not going to tell them so that they can cut my rate. So we come to an agreement. Took me 3 days to get him to get this damn rate con to me. And he's like, oh, well, you know, we decided we're just going to pay you what was agreed on from the broker. And I said, that's not going to happen. I said, I'll take it back to the shipper for you. I said, we had an agreement. I says, I've got it in writing, you know, in an email that you said you agreed to it. I says, you know, and we went back and forth. Finally, his boss got on the phone. And what it was is he was embarrassed that we caught it and his whole team didn't catch it. And then I told him, I said, look, I says, you're crying that you have time in this. How much time do you think I got? You know, but, you know, some of them, you win some, you lose some. But I mean, you can't let these people walk all over you either. So they're the ones that allowed their freight to be double brokered. You know, you're trying to do them a professional courtesy by notifying them and letting them know who's got their freight, you know?
So, Kate, what's the biggest horror story you have when it comes to dealing with these double brokers who are trying to wreck your carriers that you represent?
I mean, not really any that were. I have never had somebody run a load that was double brokered and they didn't get paid for it. There was one time that I didn't catch it prior to the delivery, but we were still able to get payment from the original broker. So I really haven't had too many that went really far, I guess, so to speak. I mean, I've had people call me back and cuss me out and like, F you, and who you think you are, and why are you calling my customer, and all kinds of stuff. It's really funny. But I mean, actually last December, not this past December, the December before that, I had one carrier who 3 times that we know of in one day somebody was attempting to use his MC to double broker some freight. One was with Ryan Transportation, one was with Armstrong, and the last one I want to say was King of Freight. And all 3 of them, no, Nolan, not King of Freight. So all of those brokers except for Nolan, so I guess the other 2, called me and they're like, hey, are you trying to book this load? It's not, it's just odd contact information and stuff. And I'm like, no, we're not. Thank you for calling me. I had to call Nolan and get that all worked out. So I've said this forever. Pay attention to the RMIS updates. Pay attention. If you get an email and it's like, oh, your contact information was updated, pay attention, because people, they can get in there and they can change it. I mean, they took off mine, they took off the owners. It was Bob, whatever, something at Gmail. I mean, it's stupid. So, and they don't have to, there's no way for, RMIS doesn't have any like procedures in place to mitigate that.
They can't track it.
So I will say that hasn't happened to me in a long time. It hasn't happened since then that I've gotten an email that my RMIS information was changed. So I don't know if they did something to maybe like try to help it. But it hasn't happened to me in a long time.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned RMIS. Let me go back to what you were talking about the authority being hijacked. That has happened to me. That happened to me back in May of last year with one of my carriers. It was the same situation. I got the contact change email from RMIS, and that particular carrier only has one truck. It's a box truck, and the driver ripped the roof off in a low bridge. So it was sitting in Ohio getting its roof replaced. So I'm suddenly getting these change notices, but the truck is still sitting in a yard getting fixed. So I was like, hey, did you guys like try to secretly fire me or something? And they're like, no, everything's fine. I'm like, okay, then we got a problem. That's one of the nice things about having a contract dispatcher watching over you, is because we can watch your authority. We can watch for these different types of things that can happen that can really pop up. And in this particular case, this is when we realized that DOT actually made a catastrophic mistake. In March of last year, DOT had a data breach, and that data breach, according to DOT, only compromised federal employee personal information. That's not true. We found out later that they also compromised DOT PIN numbers. So DOT PIN numbers are available on the dark web. And what these scammers were doing is they were looking for authorities that had that met the requirements of some of the most stringent brokers out there for sales. They were looking for multiple inspections. They were looking for at least 6 months authority, whatever, who had a public domain email address like Gmail, Yahoo, something along those lines. And then they would create a very similar address. If it's XYZ Trucking, they would put xyz.dispatch@gmail.com. And then they would take the DOT PIN number, go into the Safer system, and file a MCS 150. And then they changed the carrier's contact information within Safer, so that when they go to RMIS or to Assure Assist, which is my carrier packets, or Highway, they would tell them, hey, we changed our information. Go ahead and update your systems with our new information. It's all sitting on Safer, so on and so forth. And then they go ahead and start booking loads. Well, we discovered my carrier getting compromised about 12 hours after the fact. And in that 12 hours, between the first time that the MCS 150 was updated to when we got a new MCS 150 updated 24 hours later, during that period, we found 22 loads that were booked under that MC. And the way we found it was going through MCP, RMIS. They told us what brokers requested setup packages for that carrier. And I was able to reach out to those brokers. We intercepted 17 of those 22 loads before they ever picked up. And the 5 that did pick up, we were able to figure out who the real carrier was at the receiving end. So we ended up stopping all instances of scamming that went on with my particular carrier, only because I was so, pardon the pun, vigilant name of my company, Vigilant Transportation Services. I was so vigilant in trying to monitor the health of my carriers that we picked that up, and we were able to intercept it very quickly. So it takes a good dispatcher to recognize when these things go on. And I hear a lot of people going on about dispatcher being a dirty word in the industry. You know, if you have the ability to dispatch yourself, by all means, please do. There are plenty who can't, who desperately need somebody they can trust who will help manage their business with them. And that's where a dispatcher comes in my book. I mean, that's the way I see it. Kate, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think that dispatchers come into, I don't know necessarily if it's because dispatchers deal with multiple carriers, so maybe we get a more well-rounded experience, I guess, as opposed to, the carrier excuse me, who only experiences their own situations. But I feel like a good dispatcher is definitely something good to have in your back pocket for situations like that, because we've been through it 100 times. And I see carriers all the time. I mean, I see people, and don't get me wrong, there are good brokers that are brand new, just like there are good carriers that are brand new, but you have to be skeptical. So I see people all the time posting on the internet, hey, has anybody worked with MC 1581234? And every single time I'm like, that's brand new. It's brand new. I can look at it and tell you in 2 seconds if it's brand new. So that's the kind of stuff that you really have to pay attention for. And those are the people 9 times out of 10 that are double brokering things. Now, I have caught old established brokers double brokering, but it's crazy. But dispatchers go through a lot of that, and it's definitely a good thing to have in your back pocket. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of dispatchers that are not good. There's more bad than good. So
agreed.
A dispatcher has, I was just talking to one of my carriers about this earlier. We have a scary amount of access to all of your stuff, and we have to in order to do our job. But that takes a lot of trust. So when you're searching for a dispatcher, ask a million questions. Ask questions, get references from the references. I don't care what you do. People can go online and make fake reviews all day long. People will literally pay other people to make fake reviews for them. So just pay attention, pay extra attention, get reviews. Maybe even if you have to talk to a broker or something, hey, my, so-and-so says they've worked with you before. I mean, I can think of 100 brokers that I talk to all the time. They'd be like, yeah, we've been working with her for a couple years or whatever. So just pay attention and please get references. That's the biggest thing. Make phone calls.
I put out there all the time. I mean, you see people, looking for dispatch or asking about dispatch on social media, and I'll tell them, listen, you want to vet your dispatcher. I mean, you're vetting everybody else. You want to vet your dispatch. I mean, the carriers are spending tens of thousands of dollars to get their business up and running. And let's face it, dispatchers don't have the overhead of any other entity in the business. So
and sometimes the money they start off with is all of their money. That's their dream. And they took their entire savings. Yes, they took their entire savings and put it into starting this business. And to get screwed over by somebody that's greedy and doesn't know what they're doing and just wants easy money is pretty disgusting.
Well, I seen one today. I don't know anything about dispatching. I'm just starting out. I haven't taken any classes. You can pay me 1% and we can learn together. I mean, I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, I got to laugh, but, and the sad thing is you made a point before that back in the 1980s, there wasn't a real foresight of dispatchers being needed. Well, the lack of education, industry education from, say, a company driver or even a lease operator that's coming over to buy their own authority, or, open their own authority and buy their own truck and want to start running a truck. There's nowhere that these people can go and get a good education on it. These trucking schools, they teach them how to drive. Nobody teaches you how to run a trucking company. They don't teach you what predatory service providers to watch out for. They don't teach you what predatory service providers are or what to look for.
And people probably rightfully don't even think that that's a thing. Not that they don't think it's a thing, but it never crosses your mind.
They have no idea about it. That's how TAFs and excuse me for mentioning their name, but they're the worst in the industry. But that's how companies like that, Gulf Capital, TAFs. I mean, that's how they guarantee that, they make money by locking these people into contracts. I've had insurance providers that, an old carrier that we dispatched for, his father owned a tow truck company, bought him a nice new rig, was wanting him to start doing roll-off work, and he said no. So he bought a reefer and started running over the road. Father would not work with any other insurance agent except for the person that wrote for his house, his car, and his tow truck company. It took me 3 days to get a COI. That truck sat for 3 days trying to get a COI from that insurance agent. And I mean, listen, I'm not scared to tell an insurance agent how to go and where to go to get it. And, listen, if you're not going to be there for the customer that you wrote and got paid your commission for, then damn it, you need to give me a portal where I can get the COI for them.
I love the portals. One thing I feel a certain kind of way about Progressive, but man, their portal makes my life so much easier.
Unfortunately, Lloyd's of London doesn't have a portal, and that's who this guy was with.
That really
so
it depends. It depends. I've got a guy who's also insured through Lloyd's of London, but his agent was with Reliance Partners.
Yeah, some of the agents will have their own portals. Yes. So
yeah.
And I mean, listen, I mean, people can call me kind of rough around the edges or what, but when I take on a new carrier and it's an insurance company or an insurance provider that I'm not familiar with, I do a three-way with them. I get them right on the phone and I ask them, listen, is this going to be a problem? Because if it is, we're going to have a problem. I said, because I will call you at home. I will find your home address. I will find your phone number, and I will call you at home at 11 o'clock at night if I can't get a COI. I've done it before.
I had a carrier that had, I don't even know who his insurance agent was, but they left on Wednesdays at noon Eastern time, every Wednesday at noon. And I'm like, you know how much shit goes on after noon? What? And you can't get a COI. And a lot of times. Go ahead.
He was playing golf with a doctor, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, oh my God.
I've had doctors who wouldn't work on Wednesday past noon so they can go play golf.
There are ways around that, but they're not really the right way to do things, And I mean, but if it comes to one of my carriers being hung out to dry because of his insurance agent, then I'm going to do what I got to do, and I'll get the COI from him later, But it's just again, it runs down to inexperience, and it's not saying that these people are dumb. I don't mean it like that. It's just they're not hip to the nuances in the trucking industry. Listen, driving a truck is that's great. I mean, you can drive a truck but not know what goes on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's so much skill involved in the industry to begin with, and that's where a dispatcher really comes to help you, because the back office functions are just as important as what goes on behind the wheel. It can really be a challenge for a lot of these new guys who spend, 90% of their lives every week sitting in the cab of a truck. This is all they know, and they need the help. that they don't understand necessarily how to run a business. I know whenever I'm interviewing a potential carrier for me to work with, one of the very first things I do is I sit down and I go over a general budget with them. I want to know what their weekly cost is for the truck. What is how much money they putting aside every week for maintenance? How much are they spending on fuel? What kind of mileage are they running? What's their fuel economy look like? And I break down the budget for them and show them this is about what you can expect to generate when you're working with me. And then they sit there and say, well, we see ads all the time out on Facebook and whatnot, promising, $8,000 to $10,000 a week for box trucks. And I was like, dude, if you're paying attention to that, then you're going to die. No self-respecting dispatcher is going to sit there and make a promise like that. In fact, the reality is for a box truck today, you're getting $3,500 to $4,000. That's what you're getting. And if you can't survive off of that, you don't need to be in the business. This is not the time for you. Hopefully, rates are going to start going up. I know the analysis I did in the last couple of weeks showed an increase of about 5% over the course of the last month, at least for box trucks, certainly operating in the Midwest. But that could very well be a function of the weather and a lot of trucks trying to run out of the Midwest from the bad weather that's been up there for the last month. But a lot of my truck drivers can handle that and take advantage of the fact that there's such a low volume of trucks in the area. So we've been doing very well operating there. But, how many of them are looking at the market in that way? How many of them are looking at supply and demand? How many are trying to anticipate where the market is going to be the sharpest? And again, that's where a sharp dispatcher comes in. And Shane, you were pointing out about these new dispatchers looking for apprenticeships and education and all this other stuff who've never been in the business. I have no problem with new people trying to learn new things, but I'll be perfectly
you might be somebody's guinea pig. Don't be the guinea pig.
You can't walk into this job and be effective. You just can't. You need to have some background behind you. Maybe you've worked in a warehouse for years. And you've dealt with the same drivers because your company had contracts with them or something. You'll learn some things going through that. If you were a driver yourself, is actually the best. Is if you've driven yourself before, that is the best experience you can have at preparing you to become a dispatcher. But you have to have experience in the industry before you try doing this. And I apologize for people out there who just jump in, and you're a brave soul for doing it. But you're going to hurt people in the process. So you really got to pay attention to how you're getting into this industry.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. If somebody calls me, I have a training program. So I get a lot of calls of people looking to do training. And listen, I started all of this business to help people, not to screw people, just to be blunt. I've had people call me and ask me about my training program. And, it's been older women. And I'll be like, listen, are you expecting to jump right out of what you're doing now to a full-time compensation for the week? And they'll tell me, yeah. And I said, listen, you either need to go to work for somebody first or start doing an affiliate program part-time. Keep doing what you're doing and get involved in an affiliate program part-time. Start doing some affiliate training and some sales on some of the services that are involved in the trucking industry. Get some knowledge on that because listen, I drove for over 25 years. And when I started all my stuff, I had 25 years of driving experience, but still I was just a dispatcher. By learning the affiliate stuff, by learning about the factoring companies, how to help my carriers, my clients circumvent predatory service providing, that gave me one more resource to offer and to be an asset to my clients. So, I tell them, listen, don't just jump in thinking listen, and I'm not saying it can't be done. There are a few out there that I know that have done it, but it's the exception, not the rule. That's why you have these people overseas doing it because, they don't need to make you know, their cost of living is different than what it is here in the States. So yeah, they can charge you 1-2%, and you know what? They're getting a, you know, for that 1-2%, they're getting 1,000,000 rubles, you know. So, I mean, you know, they're living high on the hog, but it's just, I mean, as a carrier, if you see somebody posting, oh, you know, I know it all, and no, listen, none of us know it all. Vet them. I mean, call the brokers. Call a broker up. So, you know, ask the person that's soliciting you for dispatch. Listen, what brokers do you work with? You know, and that doesn't mean you have to call that particular broker agent. You call the brokerage and say, hey, listen, you know, because if they've done enough volume of work, they're going to have that dispatch's name in their system. I mean, we're well known with our dispatch company through many, probably just about all of the brokers. And they're going to know, did you communicate properly? Did you have any double brokered loads? Are your guys consistently late? You know, they're going to be able to say, hey, listen, yeah, he's stand up, you know, or, you know, we don't know nothing about him, you know, I mean, and it's, you know, get an idea of who you're going to work with.
You know, Kate, you've been talking before about a program that you've been putting together in trying to help vet different dispatch services that are out there and provide a resource to carriers who are seeking dispatchers. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that program?
It is a website called Dispatch Verify. It's www.dispatch-verify.org. And it is a completely free website to utilize. I felt like there were ways to vet pretty much everybody else in the industry. Brokers, I mean, you could read reviews, you can see their credit scores, good, bad, you know, feedback, whatever. There's ways to vet pretty much everybody except for a dispatcher. And that's a big contributing reason to why there's so much fraud in it. There's no way for people to know unless they go do their own due diligence and make a bunch of phone calls and, you know, do this and that and try to make sure that who they're working with is legit. So I essentially just built this website and people can reach out to me if they're a dispatcher, and I will go through the vetting process. I'll call their references. I'll do all of that. And then I'll put them up on the website if everything checks out. There's also a section in there. I think it's called Danger Watch List. It's in red. And that will be where dispatchers who have had complaints against them, I mean, legitimate complaints, not, you know, petty small things, but legitimate complaints.
You mean not like carrier 411 freight cards?
Yeah. No way. So that's where those are going to go. They're going to go in there where, you know, if five people come to me and say, hey, this person screwed me over. All right. They're going to go on there. But I would also like to keep like a file of everything too. Like I would like to have okay, here are all the complaints that have been given to me. But I also want to point out that this is merely another option or step. I'm not endorsing anything. I'm not telling you that these people are the shit, absolutely. And I'm not saying any of that. This is purely for due diligence purposes and to give people an idea of where to start. So I'm not guaranteeing anything. It's purely there for informational purposes, and you can take and do with it what you will. So
let me go back. Yeah,
it's a starting area vetting. You know.
Yeah.
Let me go back to the information that FMCSA put out about dispatch services last year, and I'm reading this off of the Federal Register, and I'd like to get your opinions on it. TIA, the Transportation Intermediary Association, and we all love these guys, suggested that FMCSA should require all dispatch services to register with FMCSA, either as brokers or as a new class of licensed authority. Where do you guys stand on something like that?
The broker idea is stupid. The license authority thing, I could roll with that. However, if it's anything like I don't want to get off on a big tangent or anything, but take the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, which states there shall be no barriers to entry, i.e., anyone can obtain an authority for $300 and the right documentation. You don't even have to be in the country. So is it going to be would it be something like that? Because I wouldn't really, that's like putting a tiny little rock that somebody can easily step over. Like, it's not really going to do anything, I mean, sure, there's going to be people that are like, well, I don't have the money to do that. But $300, those are going to be few and far between for the people that actually want to get anywhere with this. So I would welcome that. I think that the broker idea is kind of silly. I don't really know why anybody would think it would be a rational idea to have us register as brokers, but the dispatch authority, I could see that.
Legally, they couldn't have us register as brokers. We don't take possession of any freight. We don't deal with the shippers. We're not in the contract. We are agents or representatives of the carrier. We're simply, put it plainly, we're secretaries for a carrier is what we are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I hate to make it sound like that. I mean, go get my skirt in a minute, but I mean, it's basically that's what we are. We do what the carriers can't do from the truck. I mean, now, yes, the carrier can make phone calls and calls on loads, but we do it so that the carrier doesn't have to stop and continue, to take a break in their day and stop generating revenue. So
I like to say that it's like going to a restaurant. Why do people go to a restaurant? Well, because you don't want to cook at home. You don't want to get your house dirty or whatever. You want somebody else to do it. So you're willing to pay the extra for somebody else to do it. And it's pretty similar. I mean, similar idea. So
now,
there are a bunch of people that just hate dispatchers, and that's fine. But
you got a cat crawling on the back of your head there, John.
Oh, I know. She's on the headrest of my chair. Yeah, that's one of the spots to lay.
But now, at one time they were talking about making you have to have a brokerage in order to be a dispatcher. That never come to fruition, but it was discussed before they made these amendments in the motor carrier rules. So, I do think that becoming a dispatcher, it's just too easy. I mean, you can do it from anywhere. You can, be in the mountains of Bangladesh and trying to dispatch trucks in the United States. I mean, I've spoken to some of those guys and nothing against them. I mean, I because some of them apparently do pretty good, but there's just too many of them. I mean, and just like there's too many that you'll see them on social media. How do I get into dispatching? Well, 3 weeks later, now they're teaching people dispatching. What the hell are you teaching from? Would you dispatch one load? I mean,
I always see these, oh, here, I'm going to get you, they call it like their carrier setup documents or something like that. They're like, oh yeah, $25 and I'll give you a W-9 and I don't know, some other stupid thing. But I'm like, what? You can get that. You can type in fillable W-9 form and find it online, and you type it. You don't even have to print anything out. You just type it in and it's done. I mean, it's the weirdest stuff.
Well, everyone's trying to make a buck some way.
Well, but the thing is they're doing it off of the backbone of our country, which is the truck drivers and the carriers. And the carriers are beat up so much from all of the overhead that they endure, from the services that they're required to have, the insurance, the factoring. Back in the day, factoring was factoring. There is no legitimate old school factoring no more. Now, if a broker doesn't pay, the factor kicks it back to the carrier. Now, back in the day, before deregulation, a factoring company was a factoring company. If the broker didn't pay, it was up to the factoring company to go collect that money. I mean, and it got pretty unorthodox. It wasn't, there wasn't none of this. Oh, well, you know what? We're only going to charge you half the percentage that we charge, but we're going to have to kick it back to you. No, they were responsible for it. When they bought the note, they bought the note. Now, all a factoring company is it's basically a short-term loan. And if by a short-term loan that someone else has to pay, and if somebody else don't pay it, then you're screwed,
Because they're damn sure going to come back to you for it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, back in the day, old school factoring was exactly that. I mean, that's how factoring started. And then they started coming out with the non-recourse. Then they started coming, the non-recourse and recourse, which that's just a sales gimmick, because now if you're paying extra for non-recourse, but that company doesn't pay you, as long as they didn't file for bankruptcy, you're getting it charged back to you. But if they filed for bankruptcy, aside from surge transportation, which that's a whole nother story, the factoring companies know that they're filing for it way before, and they're going to catch it, and they're going to not credit approve you. So you're not going to have to worry about that anyway, And talking about experience of dispatchers, knowing how to handle something like that. We had a broker. Just to give you for instance, we had a broker we worked with last January. He was A-rated. It was Wolf Direct. They were A-rated in January. In July, they dropped to a C. And in September, they dropped to where they weren't credit approved. Well, we had just used them in July. We went to book with them September, not thinking to credit verify them again. So we got caught with our pants down. The broker or the carrier didn't get paid. I paid out of my pocket for that carrier. I paid for the load, but I was also able to get in, figure out what happened. I was able to find their surety bond company, put a claim against their surety bond. It took 3 months, but he got paid in full. I was chasing the company the shipper. And what happens is a lot of these shippers are putting them through automated systems like Blue Grace and things of that nature. And they're just putting them out there as a bid for all these other brokers. Well, this broker had exhausted his original surety bond. And the manner he did it in, before they started reporting it, he was able to go and secure another surety bond. Now, the FMCSA rules state that if you sign them into a surety bond contract, you cannot cancel that contract for 30 days. So they signed on September 4th. September 13th, they got wind, and that was the day I called them. They got wind of what was going on, and they couldn't cancel them until October 13th. So for a month, that broker was allowed to write as much as he could write and didn't have to worry about a thing. He wasn't going to pay nobody. And it ended up hitting them for that surety bond company told me that they took a hit for $34,000.
Wow. Yeah, that's surprisingly low given the situation.
Oh, well, no, hold on. You got to remember.
We've seen a lot larger.
Well, you got to remember, he exhausted the first $70,000 and then went, and the $30,000 was just whatever he could get away with. So he knew they were watching him at that point. But I mean, well, look at Surge. Look at Surge Transportation. What was it, $8 million?
Yeah.
And then makes a deal with Triumph that says, okay, nobody can come after you for the money. They have to go to us, and we're only paying 1% to 2% on the dollar. So, I mean, those carriers, they took a beating like crazy. The factory and a lot of the factoring companies that did sign non-recourse, there were all types of battles between the carriers and the factoring companies on that. A lot of the factoring companies had issues with that.
That was just a very difficult time. We've seen a lot of brokers in the last year suddenly exit the playing field and with little to no explanation. What was that, Kate?
You said long-standing ones too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, people you thought were almost too big to fail. I know the economy has heard that term before, but look at Yellow is another one. It was a
100
shock to me to see
years.
them go under. It's kind of crazy how this has been playing out. Well, again, one of the good parts about being a dispatcher or utilizing a dispatch service, a good dispatch service, is they're going to recognize stuff like that as it's going down. They keep up with what's going on in various industry rags. They have an idea as to who's having difficulties when it comes to their credit score, and they start to avoid them. Like Flock Freight's been having issues lately. That's been one of those that I've been avoiding when it comes to my usual round of brokers that a year ago would run to in half a heartbeat. But it really ties everything back down to how do you identify what a good or proper freight broker is versus a good and proper dispatcher. The other part of that is that dispatchers are sometimes what a freight broker calls their assistants. So I think there's a lot of terminology that's not properly defined within the industry. So if you're talking to somebody with a lot of brokering experience, and you say the word dispatcher, they're thinking about their assistants first and foremost. Are they actually thinking about the services that are out there, like the three of us, who are out there trying to do our best for the carriers? How do we separate ourselves? Separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's just a misunderstanding of the whole industry. I mean, there's just again, there's no course that a guy can take or a woman can take before she goes to open an authority and say, okay, well, this is going to give you the crash course in how to operate your authority. I mean, honestly, I think that would be better than any damn dispatch course out there, but then again, these people are spending so much damn money that they don't want to spend nothing on something like that. They think they know how to run the trucks, and it's kind of a catch-22.
I have people that will come to me with, and like I said, a whole lot of these people put their entire savings into starting their business, and people will come to me and say that they want a dispatcher, and I'll, okay, how long have you been doing this? Well, I've had my authority for a month, but I haven't really started yet, blah, 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 blah. But before they got into it, they talked to Jimmy John, and Jimmy John said that they could make $10,000 in a week, and that's what made them jump the gun. Well, I mean, and then then we have to be the bad guy and say, I'm sorry, but Jimmy John lied to you. I mean, it's sad. And it's sad because people put all of their money that they have into it based off of what they hear. And they try to do their own research. They try to talk to people, but those people lie to them in an attempt to get their business. And it's really sad, man.
On that note, I was speaking to a carrier about an hour before the show started, and it was a similar situation. The guy rents his box truck and was coming to me about the possibility of dispatching for him. And, I started to go over his budget, go over his costs. And I said, you're renting your truck at $750 a week. You can't survive in this market. As like you say, if you're trying to decide whether you should stay in or get out, with all due respect, get out. You need to cut your losses while you can, because renting is insanity in this market. No offense to any people out there who are renting and are making it work. I applaud you, but I just don't see how it's possible. It's just not. Guys, we're coming up towards the top of the hour, so it's about time to start wrapping it up. Shane, you got any final thoughts?
No, just again, it's all about educating yourself. You talk, not to get off the subject, but you were talking about somebody coming to you with a rental truck. Somebody come to me last week, and they're looking to retire and they want to start a box truck company. He didn't want the truck to go more than 150, 200 miles away from home every day. And he wanted to make $1,000 a week, or $1,000 a day. I'm sorry, with a box truck. And I says, nah. I says, and he keeps trying to throw different scenarios at me. And I'm like, listen, I said, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you know what Caitlin was saying about people just taking a leap of faith and making a purchase and getting lucky. You know, they got lucky one time in my 30 years that I've known that you've been able to get lucky like that. And that was right after the pandemic, because the market was so flipped that everybody and their brother ever thought that they might want to open an authority got in, and the rates were good. But as a result of all of that, now we're where we're at with the rates in the market. So, but no, I appreciate you having me on. You know, I hope I was able to provide some valid content for you. So,
Kate, anything from you?
I don't think so, guys. I just hope everybody is able to be safe and do your own due diligence and pay attention and don't get screwed, because it definitely can happen.
You know, I named the show Stop the Scam for a reason. And education to me is the most important thing that we can provide a potential carrier or even a broker or even a shipper. So I invite all of them to pay attention to the things that we talk about, not just in this episode, but in future episodes, so that they can try to be smarter about the decisions they make when it comes to managing their business. And for all the folks out there, if you want to get in touch with any of us, here's our contact information at the bottom of your screen. If you want to get a hold of me, it's dbbh.hotline@vigilanttransport.com. For Kate, it's kprice@rockdovefs.com, and Shane at freight-medic.com. We're always happy to talk to people who need advice. And if you ever need anything, all you have to do is reach out to us. In the meantime, I'd like to make sure everyone has a safe and happy week. We'll be back at this again next Monday. Thank you very much for joining us. And remember, stop the scam, folks. Have a good one now. Thank you very much.
Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.